Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Desiree Cassell. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. All right, let's jump in. We are here for another episode on the Pelvic Floor Core and More podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Des. Not only is this another podcast episode, but this is the 200th episode on the Pelvic Floor Core and More show. I cannot believe I've made it to episode 200, and I know on the podcast apps it looks like I have a little bit more than that, but that's because some of them were replays. So this is the 200th episode. I am so proud of myself. I'm so grateful for you, and to show my appreciation, I am giving $20 off to anybody who wants to get in on a coaching call or a therapy session with me. So send me a DM, call me, email me. My information is in the show notes below, and that way we can get you in and you can take advantage of this $20 off celebration for the 200th episode. So when you reach out, just mention this 200th episode and we will get you taken care of. But it is the middle of summer. We just had the 4th of July last week and we had so much fun, but man, I still feel like I'm recovering, feeling 35 for sure these days. The heat is not helping, that's for sure. But trying to enjoy my babies and get some movement in and some fun. And I hope you are as well. And hopefully you've stayed tuned with the podcast because we've had some pretty fun episodes recently. Last week we had an episode about returning to running postpartum because it's been a minute since we've talked specifically about running, and I have had a lot of runners come in to see me recently. So I thought it'd be a good time just to give this episode a chance to outline a lot of what we're looking for when it comes to returning to impact, especially high intensity sports like running. So go check that out. Definitely reach out if you have any questions as you're navigating any of this, guys. I do one-on-one coaching. I also have a 12-week on-demand program that walks you through the basics, all the way from breathwork, mobility, gentle bracing, all the way up to the running and the impact and the core intensity moves that you're wanting to get back into doing. And if you want more info on that, definitely reach out. We can get you on a free discovery call. We can also get you in for some coaching if you want more one-on-one support. So I'm here for you if you have any questions or issues. But with that being said, today I wanted to dive into something that's near and dear to my heart because this is me and my story with fitness and exercise, but it's definitely a lot of your story as well if you identify with being a little bit more loosey-goosey. So if you can easily touch your palms to the floor, or if you were always flexible growing up, or maybe your joints just feel loose or unstable, then you probably are hypermobile, and this episode is going to be so helpful for you because it can be so confusing when you're somebody with hypermobility or even specifically Ehlers Danlos Syndrome or EDS, where you have a genetic condition that changes your connective tissue and therefore you have less stiffness in that connective tissue. We have stretchiness in our connective tissue, so our joints are more mobile. And growing up, I honestly thought this was a good thing. You know, I was like, ooh, look how bendy I am. I can put my legs behind my head. I can, do all these cool tricks. I can bend my thumb to touch my almost touch my arm. Like I'm super flexible. But the other reality is going through puberty and into college, I started to certain joints were really flexible and other joints were just always so stiff. And I just always started to feel like, yeah, I'm flexible, but also I'm tight. Through high school, as a child even, was never able to, actually, I wasn't one of the people who could touch my palms to the floor. I felt hypermobile in other ways, but I could never touch my toes. Like my back and my hamstrings just always felt so tight and stiff up through college until I went through PT school and really understood more about what hypermobility means and what we need to do to truly address it, because it can be so confusing. You know, I have a lot of patients coming in saying, yeah, I had a PT tell me never to stretch. And I had another coaching client who was like, yeah, I was told to never do yoga, you know, and it's some of these situations where it's like, one, I'm never someone to say never do something, right? Like, even if I think it's risky, there's probably a modified way we could do it, or a adjustment if it's something you want to do. I'm definitely an advocate for doing whatever the fuck you want to do, okay? But with that being said, we also want to make good decisions for our body. And so, yeah, if someone's telling us don't do yoga, don't stretch, like that's going to make your pain worse, that's going to make you more hypermobile, it creates fear. And it also creates this confusion around, well, what can I do then? And they might just go straight into strength, which honestly is great. We're going to get into that here in a minute. But there is some reality that as a hypermobile person, we also need that balance just like anyone else. We still need to stretch, we still need to release, but it does come down to the order in which we do things and like the ratio and proportions of what we're focusing on. So I hope today's episode really just helps bring some clarity for all of you hypermobile ladies and fellas. I might have some guys here on the show listening in. I'm here for all of you because obviously hypermobility is it can be a human condition. It's not just a woman female condition. So this is helpful for you regardless of if you're a woman or a male, or regardless of if you're pregnant or not, right? But let's just dive into like, what is hypermobility? So I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but just to clarify, hypermobility does just mean increased movement in the joint. It's hypermobile. You've got excessive mobility, okay? And this could be generalized. This could be localized. This could also be part of a connective tissue disorder, like I mentioned. So you could feel like you're generally hypermobile, right? Or you might feel like just my knee or just my ankle. My ankle's so hypermobile, right? I sprain it all the time and it just rolls and it feels so unstable. Or maybe you do just have Ehlers Danlos and you have a connective tissue disorder, and this can be as severe. There's different types of EDS, and sometimes there are parts of EDS that actually affect like your heart and different connective tissues that you do want to seek medical guidance and have a big holistic healthcare team on your side. But when it comes to just like musculoskeletal, I'm your girl, okay? So why are women more affected? Because yes, men can also have hypermobility, but the reality is women are more commonly affected from hypermobility. And this comes from a few different reasons. One of the big obvious ones is hormones, right? Our hormones are different than men. We have different levels of estrogen, and especially estrogen creates this elasticity in the body. And this is why sometimes maybe during different phases of your cycle, you might feel different symptoms based on those hormones pumping through. You might have more back pain because you do have more hypermobility during certain weeks, or you might have more stiffness during certain weeks because of that. The other reality is pregnancy. Women can get pregnant, and we know pregnancy not only comes with a big increase in all of our hormones, including estrogen, but also we get some added relaxin in the system. And so again, we get more shifting and more hypermobility in our body during pregnancy. But our genetics can also play a big factor. As I mentioned, if you do have EDS or other connective tissue disorders, that can really impact your ability to stabilize and hold your joints. And some women are more prone and more likely to have EDS. EDS is seen more in women than in males. But that's not to say, again, that males don't get it. So we do just want to keep an eye on our mamas and on our women because we are more affected. And if you're wondering, like, I don't know, sometimes I feel stiff, sometimes I feel hypermobile, or maybe you've never really felt hypermobile and you've always felt stiff, you might still be hypermobile. And we'll get into that and why that is in a minute. But first, let's jump into some common symptoms. So common symptoms of hypermobility is we can see leaking and incontinence is a lot more common with hypermobility. Prolapse is a lot more common. And this makes sense, right? Like if we have more stretch in our connective tissue, then we also have like less stiffness and power when we're engaging sometimes. And so sometimes when with incontinence, you might have more elasticity. And so the connective tissue that's helping hold the pelvic bowl up, maybe your pelvic floor is engaging well, but it's not getting a good power because of the inefficiency that the stretch and its anchors are creating. So it is a system, and even if our muscles are strong, sometimes those connective tissues that are holding your muscles to your skeleton aren't really doing the job that they need. The other reality with prolapse, right, is prolapse is your organs starting to fall out of your body, which is because of connective tissue getting stretched out. So that's just an obvious thing. Like obviously we're going to have more prolapse if we are hypermobile, or we'll have more risk of prolapse, shall we say. Another thing that can happen is SI joint pain, and this is something I lived with for a long time before I realized it was hypermobility. Back pain, again, I just felt like I had a stiff back, but the reality was it was moving too much, and this made my muscles lock up to protect the joint. This is why someone that is very stiff can still feel like, or can still have hypermobility. You might not feel like you have it, but if you are stiff all the time and you stretch and then it just tightens back up and you can't get that stiffness to go away, it's probably because your body and your nervous system is saying, hey friend, our joints are so mobile, we need that tension because you're not strong enough. So stop releasing and stretching us out. And this is why we can get that message of don't stretch, don't release, but we'll get into how to solve that in a minute. Before I skip across these symptoms, let's wrap them up. So SI joint pain, back pain, hip pain. I mean, the reality is all joint pain, right? You might have more shoulder pain, more ankle pain, more knee pain. And that's just because your joints are moving more. So then you're getting more arthritic changes and more wear and tear in those joints. And so again, growing up, I thought, ooh, look how bendy I am. Like, look, people used to say I stick my butt out, but that was just my posture, my back. I didn't have good core strength. My spine is very hypermobile. I'm generally hypermobile. So my back hangs really deep into an anterior tilt, and it's just where my body hangs. And I was like, this is just my body. And I had no issues really until later in high school and in college and then in PT school when I realized, yes, this is my body, but cool. Actually, it means I'm more prone for this back pain. I'm more prone for migraines and headaches. I'm more prone for chronic tension because my body is going to be holding and guarding to protect the joints. And so, yeah, we are just more likely to have pain, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't mean we have to have pain, okay? But the other reality is you might just feel unstable. Maybe you don't have pain, or maybe you do just have recurring injuries, like recurring ankle sprains. Your ankles just roll and give out on you. We really do want to keep an eye on why that is. It could be because of the nervous system. It could be because of sensation. It could be because of connective tissue. It could be because of strength and stability. We want to look at all of those pieces. But one thing I didn't mention that can be a common symptom as well is heaviness in the pelvic floor or any symptom associated with pelvic venous disorder or pelvic congestion syndrome. And this has been a big part of my story because if you didn't know, I have PVD, and PVD is stretched out vessels, right? So again, your arteries, your veins, these are vessels made out of connective tissue. So if you do have hypermobility, and especially if it is more generalized in your body or a genetic disorder, then like me, your vessels are more easily able to stretch. The downside of that is they don't necessarily have the recoil that should come with that. So then you're more likely to get varicose veins and again, prolapse and hemorrhoids and all of these situations where we had pressure go into to an area, the connective tissue adapted and stretched, but then it doesn't necessarily rebound and recoil when that pressure's gone. So now we have stretched varicosities, and that might lead to spider veins down the legs, or ovarian site pain, or constipation, or hemorrhoids, or heaviness. These are all symptoms of PVD. So if you are curious if you do have PVD or if you have hypermobility, obviously reach out to me and we will get you on a coaching call. With that, let's jump into why hypermobile women often feel tight. I obviously kind of preluded to this a little bit, but this is that big like, oh, okay, now it makes sense, because loose joints do not mean you have loose muscles. The reality is oftentimes your muscles become overprotective. You can be both flexible and tight at the same time, okay? And this is why it gets so confusing, and why, like, for me, I didn't even think I was hypermobile, really. I had some cool tricks. I could put my knees behind my legs behind my head, and, I could do these certain things, but I could never touch the floor when I reached over. I could never touch my toes. So I was always like, I'm so tight. I'm so stiff. And then as I stretched and worked things out, I'd feel like, oh, I'm so loose now. And then all of a sudden I was tight again. But this is because your muscles are guarding. They're overprotective. They don't have the strength. So they're stabilizing those joints as much as they can, which creates tension. And that's unfortunately why stretching isn't always the answer, because when you're stiff and tight, you will go stretch, right? But I already mentioned, if you know you're hypermobile, you might have even been told already not to stretch. Now I'm going to tell you why both of those aren't necessarily the right answer. So instead of never stretching or always stretching, we need to do it in the right order. But instead of stretching, the reality is, like, stretching is helpful, but it's going to tighten back up if we don't first address your stability, your strength, your endurance, and your control. So those joints need to feel safe and protected and stable and strong before those muscles around it are going to relax. That's the nervous system's way of protecting you and protecting your joints. So that's why we do really want to work on stability and strength as a hypermobile person. But a lot of times those muscles over years of guarding have created trigger points and tension. So then if you go start strengthening, you might create more pain. This is why releasing is really helpful. Fascial work, foam rolling, using a ball, a Theragun, getting into those muscles to help open them up so that they're not also yanking on already stretched out connective tissue, and also so that they can strengthen and engage better when you do go to strengthen and stabilize and do the heavy work. And we can then still stretch a little, but I encourage a light stretch after we do a little bit of release work. So we do a little release work, we open up the muscle tissue, then we stretch that muscle tissue after we just opened up the fascia and the trigger points so that the muscle can truly open. Then we stabilize, then we strengthen, then we support so that the body learns, oh, these are the muscles I'm supposed to use to hold this joint, not all of these muscles around this space, right? So then it has this ability to let go of that chronic tension and only hold the muscles that are engaged and that you turned on to hold your body in place. But there is a pelvic floor connection here, because pelvic floor is connective tissue and muscle. As I mentioned, that pelvic bowl is stitched up into that pelvic outlet through your connective tissue. Every muscle in the body is connected to the skeleton with our ligaments and tendons and fascia and connective tissue. And so if your support systems, or the connective tissue, or what I like to call the anchors in your body, if they aren't working efficiently, then you do get leaking, heaviness, pain, pressure, because we're not getting the true support that we need. And this is why also, if we have a loose hypermobile pelvic floor, it's usually chronically tight, or I shouldn't say loose if your connective tissue is loose, right? So if the connective tissue is hypermobile and it's weak muscle, then the muscle ends up tightening and being chronically tight. And then we get chronic tension symptoms thinking, oh, I just have to release, which is true, but we also need to strengthen. So we really want to prioritize strength training. We really want to prioritize progressive overload, which means every time you work out or lift, do something harder. Maybe it's a couple more reps. Maybe you're holding that a couple more seconds. Maybe you're doing an extra set. Maybe you're adding a little bit more weight. There's a lot of ways you can progressively overload, but this is the key for getting the body to build strength. The other thing we really need to think about that I always incorporate is breath work, because this helps with the pressure management in the system. It helps make sure forces aren't getting shoved in places that we don't want them, so that connective tissue isn't being excessively stretched out when it doesn't need to be. We also really need to work on proprioception. This is the body's ability to know where you are in space. So similarly, when you're like balancing on one foot, close your eyes. That's challenging your proprioception, and it's going to be great for your ankle and knee and hip and core stability. This is telling the joints to turn on their little listening ears and their little inspecting sensors to know, where am I at? How should I adjust? What should I do? When those receptors are kind of shut off or dulled, then the brain isn't getting the signal to respond and support the joint. So that's why we get chronic ankle sprains or your knees just buckling on you. So proprioception is huge. One big thing to help encourage proprioception and avoid some damage to those receptors is not hanging in end ranges of your joints. So this is me not hanging in that anterior tilt, or me not locking my knees out, right? So just starting to notice, like, are you always standing with your knees locked? Are you always standing with your back swayed or hanging into the front of your hips? So we always can check in and just see, how am I doing? If I'm hanging at the end range of a joint, my joint's probably not going to be happy, and I'm also probably stretching out connective tissue, angering the joint capsule, and also impairing some of these proprioceptive sensors. So make sure you're just kind of keeping an eye on your posture and everything. But the other thing we do want to work on is our coordination, so that your body does get that sense of control and safety through movement, when to turn off certain things, when to turn on certain things, how to coordinate it all together so that it does, again, have that sense of safety to release that tension and allow you to have that mobility that is already in your joints. The other huge thing with hypermobility is recovery, because your connective tissue is a lot more prone to tendinitis. It's a lot more prone to tears if you're hypermobile. So having that recovery time where you're doing some gentle mobility, maybe you're even doing a little release work on a ball or a foam roller, maybe you're even icing a little bit if things are a little sore and tender at the joint. This all helps to make sure that we're not increasing too much inflammation and causing too much strain and wear and tear in those connective tissue and joint structures after our exercises. What we do want to avoid is aggressive stretching. So I do think stretching is helpful, but sometimes we can overdo it. And so having some stretching in, and especially with stability and strength right after, not a bad idea. But if all you're doing is stretching or yoga and you're not doing any strength, and you're just really going at that stretching because you're so tight, you're probably not going to get very far, and you honestly might make that hypermobility worse. And the other thing is chasing flexibility. Sometimes when we feel stiff, we want to feel flexible. We want to have that range of motion. You know, it's really cool. I've been doing so much more strength training in my life in the last 5 to 10 years, and now I can put my palms on the floor. You know, I actually feel pretty flexible, which is pretty interesting. Now my adductors, not so much, but my hamstrings and back have come a long way. And so it is, as we add in strength and stability, you'd be surprised that that flexibility comes. But if you're chasing the flexibility, you're probably going to end up frustrated because those joints are going to be stiff because your muscles are going to guard and hold. The other thing is overdoing yoga, and this is maybe only for some people. The reality is yoga is really different. There's a lot of different types of yoga, right? And yoga can be great at stabilizing. Yoga can be great at toning and strengthening your body. Yoga can be great at meditation and breath work and proprioceptive and mindfulness input to your body. I love it. So I think that there's a lot of different types of yoga. I think that the one we kind of want to be careful of is those long hold stretches. So if you go to a yoga class and they are doing a lot of long stretching holds, that might not be the class for you. And even if you do it here and there, make sure you're following it up with some stability and strength. And if you're seeing more pain and symptoms, then yeah, you might want to reassess or reach out so that you can get guidance on what truly is causing your issues, because it might not be the yoga class. But definitely don't have yoga be your end all be all, because as a hypermobile person, we need some strength and resistance training in our lives. And also with that, not only relying on the mobility work, right? So we're not just chasing the flexibility, mobility, the stretch. We really do need that strength and support. And if your symptoms are persisting or getting worse, leaking, prolapse, instability, pain, heaviness, prolapse issues that come with like urgency and beyond just the heaviness, reach out. I am here for you. And obviously, again, I have the online coaching option where you can do my Restore program. And that is a 12-week program on demand. You still have access to me independently through the DMs in there to send me videos, send me pictures, ask me questions. So you're still getting coaching through that 12-week program, but it's more self-paced. Or you can reach out and we can do a one-on-one virtual session or an in-person therapy session. And I am happy to look more in depth to your history, your individual issues, your injuries, what you've been dealing with, like how you're feeling, and just get a more individualized plan for you. But sometimes the answer isn't more movement, it is better support. And your body isn't broken because it's flexible. It may simply need more stability than you've been taught. So definitely reach out if you have any questions. I hope this helped kind of summarize and just give good clarity to you, because I know it can be really confusing. But otherwise, friends, I hope that you have a great week. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Stay tuned for next week on the Pelvic Floor Core and More show. I'm really just kind of getting one episode out a week right now in the summer, and I'm proud of that. And we'll probably pick it up back up to 2 episodes a week come the fall when I have more time and kiddos are in school. But stay tuned because episodes are still coming out. And don't forget, it is the 200th episode, which means I am giving away that $20 off for a coaching or therapy session virtually or in person. So make sure you reach out. Information is in the show notes below. Mention the 200th episode and you'll get $20 off. Otherwise, can't wait to see you here next time. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality, Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality podcast.